In this video, I'll be talking about solving a quadratic equation using the square root property. Um, Recall that the square root of -1 is equal to I, and when you're dealing with I, that's complex numbers. They're not real numbers. And this says solve for x, where x is a real number. Okay, so if you do get the square root of a negative number at all in this, well, we're going to stay away from that. We'll just say, okay, well, that's the negative square root. That involves an I, so we'll say no solution. So anytime we get a negative square root, we'll just stop right there and say no solution. All right, so let's take a look at the first problem. We've got x squared equals 144. I want to take the square root of both sides. And on the right side, I'm going to put a plus or a minus. The reason for that being is we don't know if the number inside of this x before it got squared was positive or negative, because you square negative and it turns positive. You square positive and it stays positive. So we have to write both possibilities. Okay, so that'll be x squared is equal to, let's see, square root of 144 is 12. So plus, whoops, not x squared, just x, plus or minus 12. So if you want to write that as two different solutions, it would be 12 and -12. Okay, let's look at the next one. We will use the square root property here. Okay, here we go. Plus or minus, okay. So I've got x is plus or minus the square root of a negative number. That's going to give me an I, right? The square root of a negative number is I. So this is going to involve an imaginary number, which makes it complex. We're dealing with real numbers here, so we're going to say no solution for this one. No real, I guess I should say no real solution, and they wanted real solutions. Okay, let's look at the next one. X squared equals 36. I can do square root of both sides, the plus or minus. Square root of 36 is 6. So you get x is equal to plus or minus 6, which is 6 and -6. Okay, let's see, x squared equals 121. I take the square root and put the plus or minus over here. Square root of 121 is 11, so we get x is equal to plus or minus 11, so 11 and -11. Okay, get down here. So x squared equals 18. Do the square root and put the plus or minus. Okay, so that gives me 8, or x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 18. That doesn't have a whole number solution, but we can reduce it. Look at your square numbers. Square numbers are 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25, 6 squared is 36, 7 squared is 49, and 8 squared is 64. That should be plenty for these problems. Do any of these numbers go into 18? Obviously nothing bigger than it does, but these numbers, which one goes in? The 9 does. So it's going to be x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 9 times 2. I can now take the square root of 9, but leave the 2 inside. The square root of 9 is 3, so I get x is equal to plus or minus 3 square roots of 2. So if you wanted to write that as two solutions, it would be 3 square roots of 2 and -3 square roots of 2. Okay, let's look at the next one. We take the square root of both sides in this one, and now immediately I'm taking the square root of a negative number, so that's not going to be real. So we'll say no real solution. You could get a solution if you could do the imaginary number in complex numbers, but not on this problem. It said no solutions other than real ones. Okay, x squared equals 23. Square root, plus or minus. 23 is a prime number, so it can't be reduced. It's not going to be divisible by any of these numbers. So we just get x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 23. That's positive square root of 23 and negative square root of 23. All right, last one, we got x squared is equal to 42. Take the square root of both sides with a plus or minus, and that gives me x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 42. Now, do any of our numbers over here go into that? Does 4 go in? No. 9, definitely not. Does 16 go in? No. So what goes in? Does anything go in? I think not. So this will be x is equal to square root of 42 and negative square root of 42.